international researchers say that South African police use unacceptably high levels of force. This research coming out this week. This is something that the Human Rights Commission and many others have been concerned about. Let's speak to researcher now, Professor Ignacio Cano from the Laboratory for the Analysis of Violence of the State University of Rio de Janeiro. Professor, thank you for being with us. I think many South Africans won't be surprised. Just tell us a bit more about the findings around South African police.
We have analyzed all the cases recorded by IPID during 1 year. IPID is the external oversight mechanism created by the South African state. And we have compared indexes of use and abuse of force in different countries. What we have found is that for most indicators, the results for South Africa are acceptable, except for one, which is the proportion between civilians killed, shot and killed by police, and police officers shot and killed themselves. And the proportion is approximately 12 civilians shot and killed by police for every police officer shot and killed. And this is beyond international standards, because police officers are only authorized to use lethal force, that is their guns, when their own lives are at risk or the lives of other citizens. So when there is such an imbalance between the number of civilians killed and the number of police officers killed, this is an indication of excessive use of force, and also of the possibility of reducing significantly the number of people shot and killed by police every year. The year we analyzed, which was 2017-2018, 390 people were shot and killed by police officers. So we believe that according to these results, there is scope to reduce significantly these number of deaths.
I'm interested that you say that you look at these indicators across countries. I mean, could you compare a country like South Africa to a country like America, the USA, where George Floyd was killed and that got the attention of the world?
Well, we are comparing with other countries in Latin America where there is an intense problem of excessive use of force. So we're not comparing South Africa with countries that are in a relatively good situation. We are comparing South Africa with other countries where the problem is very apparent. But I think the case of George Floyd underlined recently that this is not only a problem for African countries or Latin American countries. This is a universal problem. And we have been arguing for a while that the possibility of excessive use of force should be treated as a professional hazard by police officers, because they are entitled to using force to protect themselves and the public. There has to be a very close monitoring of these use of force, because there is the professional risk that they go too far and that they end up producing more harm than they are preventing. So that's why I think it's a universal problem, and the case of George Floyd has underlined this for the whole world.
I don't know if you can comment on this, but what we've often looked at on this show is claims by other researchers that IPID, it's great that IPID is there as this watchdog body over the police, but they can only make recommendations. And then the police top brass essentially has to discipline these members who were out of line. And we keep hearing of police members who should be gone, who are still there, who are perhaps perpetuating the violence. Are there any models that we could draw from, anything that South Africa could do in that situation?
Yes, on the one hand, there are only 3 countries in Africa that have such oversight mechanisms, including South Africa, Kenya, and Sierra Leone. On the other hand, these mechanisms are limited, and other South African scholars have noted that the very existence of IPID makes it so that SABC, the South African Police Service, doesn't really pay a lot of attention to internal control, because they assume there is already an external control. So there are some international models, for example, the Northern Ireland police ombudsman example, where this external mechanism not only reports and recommends, but they investigate themselves the allegations against police officers. So this is one of the best examples in the world of external oversight, because it's not just about reporting. They carry on their own investigations. The same applies also to Jamaica. And of course, their clout is a lot stronger when they can investigate and present the cases directly to the prosecuting authority and not just recommend disciplinary measures to the police.
Yeah, and ensure that nobody is protected by their internal bosses who may like them. So finally, could we say, I mean, you're saying that this ratio works. You can look at the ratio of people killed by police officers versus police officers killed by South Africans. Because some would say, well, South Africa is a violent country. Maybe those police officers are just defending themselves. Is that an excuse, or does this ratio really put paid to that?
Well, we use a series of indicators, a series of ratios, and these indicators are designed precisely to take into account the prevailing levels of violence. Because police all over the world will say that they are only responding to the violence they're facing, which in many cases is true. But the ratios, for example, well, as I said before, South Africa has fared relatively well in other ratios and other indicators. But in this particular indicator, when you compare the number of killings by police and number of police officers killed, if you have a small number of police officers killed, then there would be no justification for them to kill a great number of people. This imbalance of 12-1 is far too great, because police officers can only use the weapons, the guns, if their lives or the lives of the public are under imminent threat. So even if the environment is very dangerous, as it is sometimes in many South African communities, then there should be a risk for police officers themselves. And when you see only a few police officers killed and many, many more, like in this case, civilians killed, this points to an excessive use of force. But it's already taken into account the prevailing violence in the environment.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation tonight. That was Professor Ignacio Cano from the Laboratory for the Analysis of Violence of the State University of Rio de Janeiro.